No, but let me just go ahead and begin recording this to the desktop. And I'm going to turn off my video here and just show my screen so I don't interfere with the presentation. Okay, so I'll go through the set of slides here for everyone, and then we'll take a short break there for questions, and then I'll do some demonstration of the platform to give you a look and a glimpse into to what's possible here. So what I hope to do here is provide an overview of the capabilities of ArcGIS Online and hopefully give you enough information to determine if it's useful for your needs, the work you do at the university or beyond, and if it's a beneficial resource for data analysis, data sharing, or data curation. ArcGIS Online, it's a web-based collaborative platform. It is hosted by the company ESRI. So this software, it doesn't reside on a system we have at the University of Idaho. It is hosted by Esri, and it's hosted on Amazon's platform. And it allows you to use, create, manage, analyze, and share maps, apps, and data. The public-facing URL, www.arcgis.com, lets you explore a wide variety of the content that's available anonymously and publicly out there. You can set up a public account, a free account that has quite a bit of functionality, although not quite as extensive as we have with our organizational account or other entities might have with an account that falls under a license that they pay for. One thing to note, if you don't see some functionality in there today, you might see it in the not too distant future. This is a quarterly update cycle for ArcGIS Online. Actually, an update just took place this morning. They are continuing to improve and add functionality to the site every quarter. So it's pretty dynamic. It continues, this evolution from desktop GIS to web-based GIS, where web-based GIS, is kind of a new frontier in a sense, where we share data more broadly and we access data from many different devices, mobile devices, desktop and laptop devices. And it's really moving away from the desktop being the central focus, whereas the platform, the web-based platform, is the focus, and desktop or mobile apps are just clients to that platform. And then again, we're afforded access at the University of Idaho under a site license that we have. Others may fall under licenses they have at their organizations, federal, state, local. Or you may just be a public user who has a public account on ArcGIS Online. I'm going to talk about several different pieces here. I'm going to highlight some of the apps that are available on this platform because they're quite popular for folks, I think. There are ready-to-use maps and data out there across the platform. We're going to talk a little bit about managing content in groups and how to share different items. We'll touch on geoprocessing analysis, which is available on the online platform, although it is not to the extent that it is available in desktop applications like ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. But they're continuing to add geoprocessing tools, so you may see more of those in the future. We'll talk briefly about security and privacy and compliance, and then learning resources that are available. And then we'll do a tour and a demo there. So apps, I kind of break these down into 4 buckets, Esri does, for apps for the field, if you're interested in mobile data collection, kind of apps for the office where you're doing more exploration and analysis of data, apps that you might use to share information with the community or share information with colleagues and partners. And then kind of a developer's piece for apps where you could build your own applications if you had the desire to do that. Now, apps for the field, some of the most popular include ArcGIS Field Maps, which is one of their newer offerings and is replacing some older apps. If you've heard the term Arc Collector for ArcGIS, that one's being replaced with Field Maps along with some others. But it's really a map-centric app that allows you to do mobile data collection and editing. If you're outside of network range, you can do offline data collection with that up to a certain number of features. So that's a popular one to take a look at. If you're looking for a form-centric approach, Survey 123 is quite popular. That's another one that gives you a slightly different flavor and approach for collecting survey data. And then there's one called Quick Capture, which is really popular for quick field observations. Take a photograph, upload it, and in the slide deck I sent out, you should have links to all these on the information pages if you want to take a look at them a little more closely. So those are 3 real popular ones for field data collection. At the office, there's a number of them that are available. Many of you who are longtime ArcGIS users are probably familiar with ArcPro, ArcGIS Desktop. ArcPro is a newer offering that will replace ArcCatalog and ArcMap, their legacy software. So if you haven't used that, you might take a look at ArcPro. But it's the newer desktop application that's built with GIS, WebGIS in mind. ArcGIS Maps for the Office is just a plugin for Excel. If you're comfortable working in Excel and you want to make maps in Excel, you might look at ArcGIS Maps for Office. Insights is a web-based tool on the ArcGIS platform that allows you to do a lot of analytics. And if you're familiar with Tableau, it's very similar to that. You can do analysis and really delve into your data with insights. Notebooks are in ArcGIS Online now. ArcGIS notebooks, they refer to them, but if you're familiar with Jupyter notebooks, it's a very similar concept. Spatial analysis and visualization within these notebooks on the platform. Business analyst and community analyst are available for doing site selection or impacts of decisions. Geoplanners out there for scenario planning. ArcGIS Urban for city planning. So these are all tools that are available through the platform. And then Scene Viewer and Map Viewer, where you can create and share 2D and 3D maps. Let's talk about a couple apps for the community. Story maps, and let me just come out. Okay. I'm sorry. Story maps are quite a popular app that's available for digital storytelling. That's evolved quite a bit, and they now have a more intuitive and friendly story map builder. So you may have heard that app out there and available. It's one we have accessible on the platform. Dashboards are available in ArcGIS. It's an app that really gives you a quick glimpse at information. Allows you to bring in real-time information and update those dashboards. So that's another one that's available. And Hub is another app slash site for community engagement initiatives. So if you want to build a Hub site where you share information and create web pages and share content, you might take a look at that. Through the University of Idaho, we have access to what's known as Hub Premium, which has a little more functionality than Hub Standard. So that's another potential app for folks to work across communities and share information and content. There's a number of app builders. The first 3 here don't require coding. So if you're not someone who wants to build an app from the ground up, there are a number of configurable apps where you choose a template and embed your own web map in it. Web App Builder is another one that's popular where you choose different themes and widgets. And Experience Builder is also another offering that's available. If you want to get into doing development, App Studio is available if you want to develop apps for mobile devices. And there's a number of application programming interfaces, their JavaScript one being quite popular, or software development kits that are available for building apps from the ground up. So those are also available on the platform. So that's a collection of apps that are currently available out there. Let's talk a little bit about maps and data that might already exist for you to use. In addition to, you know, adding your own operational layers and data that you have, there's a number of different base map data sets that exist that you're welcome to take advantage of. And Esri has a product called Living Atlas of the World, which is a collection of authoritative and curated geographic information that they assemble and their partners contribute to. So when you're looking for some data sets that might be available, say for the United States from the federal government, they could be shared through the Living Atlas. It's a good place to start for curated and authoritative data. And we'll add a data set from that layer in a map. Excuse me, we'll add a layer from that resource in one of the maps we do. There's also many other options, right? Colleagues you can share data with across the platform, folks just within your organization you can share data with. And you can also access data from a number of OpenGIS formats like GeoJSON or Open Geographic Consortium, web mapping services, and that type of thing. So there's a lot of data that's already out there. Some of it may be accurate, some of it may not. It's accessible in a number of ways, and it's out there and available to explore on the platform. Let's talk just a little bit about managing content, and we will do this during the demonstration portion of this session. When you sign into ArcGIS Online, you have the ability to create folders to manage content, and you can create and add and move and delete and share items from this content tab. It's much like Windows Explorer, you know, on a Windows desktop, your kind of document management piece. And it provides you links also to creating documentation and metadata, looking at usage statistics on your item, how often the item is getting accessed, and various settings for different items. For example, if you want to enable delete protection for an item to be safe that you don't accidentally delete something, you can do that. So that's where a lot of your management takes place in the content tab in ArcGIS Online, and we'll take a look at that shortly in the demo. You also have the ability to create groups in ArcGIS Online, where you might have interest in sharing a collection of items around, you know, a specific project or area of interest. For example, you could create a group for a class and have all the students be members in that group and then share data among that group, right? So it allows you on that groups tab to create and manage groups. So you name groups and provide some metadata about that group, describe it, and add and remove members from that group, and control the settings on who can view and contribute to that group. So once you're in ArcGIS Online, the content tab and the group tab are two where you end up doing a lot of management of different pieces of content. One thing to note, and a question we get quite often about groups, is the ability for multiple people to edit one item. And that does exist in the settings, and I want to highlight it here that you can set up a group where multiple people can edit a item. And once you do that, it can't be changed for that group. So you want to think about this in terms of management as you go forward. But if you set shared updates on a group, you can have multiple people edit a single item. Let's just talk for a minute about sharing items on the platform. By default, everything's private, similar to a lot of other web-based platforms. And you as a user choose to share it more broadly, right? So within this platform, individual items can't be shared per se, but you create groups where you share items within a group. So groups can include members of your organization or members of other organizations across the platform. So if you know someone at a state agency, a local government, a federal agency that is on the platform, you can share items with them in a more restricted way than just sharing it publicly. The only thing you can't do for a shared update group right now, you can't add a member outside of the organization you're a member of to a shared update group. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But really your 4 levels are privately, where you're sharing it with yourself, at the group level, where you're sharing with a collection of people, at the organization level, so everyone in your organization has access, which we at the library do that for some aerial imagery data sets where we have a license for just those affiliated with the organization. And then you can share anonymously or publicly. Geoprocessing tools that are available. This is a quick snapshot of some of those out there. You can join and aggregate data. You can do buffers and drive time, that kind of thing. You can see here that you can extract data and dissolve boundaries. And there's a handful of geoprocessing tools that are available, some of the more popular ones here. But you know, pretty quickly, if you're going to do a lot of analysis, spatial analysis anyway, you'll look towards the desktop GIS applications to perform a lot of the geoprocessing. And you'll access those features and data layers that you have on the platform from that client. So there's a few out here, but it's not a real extensive list. And the real power for spatial analysis lies in the desktop clients, as it has for many years. In the slide deck you received, you have a link to those different types of analysis geoprocessing tools on the platform. Let's take a minute just to talk about security. If you have any questions about that, if you go to trust.arcgis.com and understand Esri's policies related to this. For example, the platform is FedRAMP required. It meets FedRAMP policies, I guess you'd say. So the federal government is using it pretty extensively. But if you have concerns about the security of your data or the privacy of your data, taking a look at trust.arcgis.com is a good place to start and to understand you know, the current policies of the platform. Want to mention learning resources. You know, there's a number of Esri training materials out there that are available to the public, and you can certainly watch videos that are publicly available and access different pieces of content that they have available. With a site license, you have access to a little more, you know, more of their self-paced learning resources that are out there. So if you do go to esri.com training, and for University of Idaho folks, if you sign in with your VandalNet ID, you'll have access to a more extensive catalog of training resources. So I encourage you to look at that. If you have a specific area that you want to target, maybe just one specific app that you might have interest in, you might take a look there. There's a number of ArcGIS Online resources that are available, and at least for folks at the University of Idaho, we do have access to Esri technical support staff. So if you run into a bottleneck, you think there's a bug in the software, you're really stuck, we can open up a case with Esri technical support. And then you can certainly contact me anytime at the library. you know, for kind of broad questions about apps or data to look at, down to technical questions if you're having trouble with licensing or errors in the software, and we can work to resolve those. So I'm always available for that. Usually by email is the best way to get me. So again, this is the demonstration I'm going to do is on our teaching and scholarly research portal. For folks who are at other agencies, it's likely you have a different subdomain here. For example, ours is UIdaho on the platform maps.arcgis.com there. If you're have a public account, you just go to arcgis.com and sign in with your public ID. For folks at the University of Idaho, if you're doing teaching and scholarly research for using the platform, you'll sign in with your VandalNet ID, and you are granted access to begin making items and groups and creating content and sharing and documenting through that portal. Now, I want to mention here too that Esri set up a separate portal for us for administrative and business operations of the university, right? So our license is broken down into a site that is intended for teaching and scholarly research, and then a site that's intended for administrative and business operations. And on that one right now, there's an invitation requirement to join where you can't just, we don't have anybody being able to sign into that who has a net ID. So if your work is going to involve administrative and business operations, please get in contact with me. The interface we'll see this today is very similar. There's just a few pieces of functionality we don't have access to for administrative and business operations. So I want to make that distinction for folks at the UI, that we do have two portals and they have these intended purposes, and Esri's asking that we navigate in these two directions based on the work we're doing. So I want to stop sharing there for just a moment. I want to, let me just pause the recording. Down the participants and let's go over to the web browser, and oops, I need to share my screen. I'm going to share this. Okay, can everyone see that now? Okay, all looks good. Okay, yep. Okay, great. Thank you. So uidaho.maps.arcgis.com. This is the homepage of our research and teaching portal. And again, this sign-in process here will be through your University of Idaho VandalNet ID for folks at the University of Idaho. Now, if you're at a different agency, you'll have a different subdomain on here, and you may have a slightly different sign-in process, but the functionality we see beyond this will be similar. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in with my VandalNet ID. You'll get a large box that says sign in with the University of Idaho. You'll be taken to our single sign-on page, and I've already made sure Duo is all set up here and friendly, and we'll come in here. So the landing page that you're taken to is the organizational tab, the organization tab across the menu bar in ArcGIS Online. You'll see I'm the administrative contact here, and a little information about our institution, some open data groups where we share data, and some of the most recent content that's been shared, either at the public level or at the organization level for our organization. And you can look at a list of members that have signed into the platform from the University of Idaho too. Now the home tab just takes you back to that home page for our research and teaching portal. There's a gallery tab which has a number of data sets that we're sharing for folks to explore. And this is also available publicly out there for folks to take a look at, right? And you can search these data sets and add them to web maps, and all these, I believe, in this particular group are shared publicly. So they're available to explore in the gallery tab. Map viewer we're going to take a look at. This is one of the apps for making 2D web maps. This is where we're going to work here shortly. Scene viewer is a 3D representation of that, kind of like a Google Earth approach. Notebooks they've added recently to the menu bar. And then the groups tab that we talked about in the slide deck, and the content tab. So if you go to the groups tab, you can create your own group, or groups will show up here that you're a member of, groups that are available in your organization, and where you manage them is through this tab. You have the ability to create a group and describe that group, add a tag to an item for discovery, for searching, that type of thing. And then you define, your group membership and how people are added to the group, and the ability down here to do shared updates if that's of interest. So this is where you create groups and set the parameters on groups. Let's take a look at the content tab here. This is where you'll end up spending a good bit of time if you use this platform. By default, it shows the content that you have made available. You can also, mark favorites that you have out there. You can look at content that's available across the organization, or on all content that's available in the Living Atlas. We spoke briefly about that, where it's that curated set of data that Esri and partners make available that's vetted. And you can certainly explore that, like worldwide imagery, or elevation data, or a whole host of different layers that they have available. So right now, you can make one level of folder hierarchy in here. Right now, you can't make subfolders, so that you're aware of that. But to create a new folder, we can go in here, and I'll go ahead and say a new folder here. And depending on how we want to organize our data, we can store for a given project, in a folder here. We have the ability from here to add an item from our desktop, which I'm going to demonstrate. And you can also create apps from here. We talked about some configurable apps and story maps and dashboards and web app builder you can get at from right here. You also have the ability to a wide range of those apps we talked about from the little checkerboard menu up here that lists quite a number of those apps. But for this demonstration, where we're going to add some data and make a map, what we can do is add an item from our computer. Now we can reference a URL. You can add data from a cloud drive, right? If I was hooked up to OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox, we can get items from there. Depending on how you want to handle content management and where you store data, that could be one approach that you take. So I've got some data sets on my just my local machine here. I have one GeoJSON file. I have a comma separated values file, which is one format we'll take a look at because a lot of people might end up using that quite often. And I also have a shape-file, which you could upload and make that available. So in this comma separated values file, I have a set of tabular data that has coordinates with every record in it, right? Latitude and longitude. These could be addresses for different types of data or some other location-based information, or it could just be tabular data without a location in it. But I'm going ahead and add this tabular data to ArcGIS Online. So if I want to add an item from my computer, and I want to select one of those given files, I'll go ahead and do the CSV first. This one is just an old weather stations file. I'll select that, and by default, the title is the file name. It requires you to add a tag in here, and I'm going to call it weather stations. So you'll be prompted if you don't do that. We are going to create a hosted layer for this. So it's going to turn that tabular CSV file into a web-based GIS layer. It's called a hosted layer here for features. Now, in this data set, I'm going to locate features by coordinates, right? I don't have an address in here or place names. We could just add it as a table, but I'd like to be able to show it on a map. And if I happen to have my fields named latitude and longitude, it'll pick up the location fields from that name. If these were not named similarly to this, you'll have to designate which field you want to use for location. But in here, it picks it up. I think if it's called Latin long, it also does it too. And then we'll just go ahead and add that item. So what it's going to do is grab that CSV file. It's going to process it into a hosted layer here on ArcGIS Online. And so this is the item description page for this new feature layer we just created from that comma separated values file. And it placed it in our content location. So I'm going to go back over to content real quick. When it uploads, it takes you to this item description page, which you can begin to edit if you see fit, like weather stations of Idaho. And you can add a title and a summary and a description, but let's just look at where those data were placed. And in this case, they were placed in my new folder where I was located when I added the item. So I have the original CSV is uploaded, and then I have this new feature layer, right? And it's only available to me right now, just the owner. So let's take a look at just some of the other features in here on the item description page, where you can edit metadata and you can place some settings on. If you want to have a terms of use in here, initially you might not fill all this out, but if you're going to share it publicly or with others, you might want to have some credits in here. This is the location, the URL of this service, if you want to get to it from different apps and devices. We can look at the data, just the tabular data, right? It's just the data in the CSV that we uploaded. You can get a quick glimpse of visualization of the data here on a map, which will actually create a different one in Map Viewer. But if you just want to look at it quickly, you can see all the points. You can look at the usage. And then there's settings in here, like if we wanted to enable delete protection. There's other settings if you want to do data collection, make the data publicly available and that type of thing. Do you want to enable editing on this layer, for example, and track changes to this layer and that kind of thing? Do you want people to export it into a variety of different formats? So you have a number of options on the settings tab within the item description presentation here. From this, you can also share the item and export it and make a number of changes to it. But what we'll go ahead and do is just add it to the map viewer so that we can make a map. So right now we have a hosted feature layer, right? A feature layer here, and we're going to add that layer to a map. Now, as I mentioned, things are constantly getting updated on this platform. And as of this morning, the classic map viewer is a new name for what was the one map viewer they had. And they had in beta one called Map Viewer. So Map Viewer is the new app that came out of beta today that's available. And Map Viewer Classic is still available though. Although for the long term, I'm sure it'll be sunsetted. We'll go ahead and look at it today, but you may end up wanting to look at the new map viewer that's probably going to replace Classic down the road here. So we'll go ahead and open this layer, right? We've got this hosted layer, and we're going to open it in a new web map. We're just going to add it to the web map. And you'll see all the points show up. Here's our layer that's in our new web map, right? And if you've used desktop GIS for a long time to create maps, a lot of that same functionality is in here, right? So we can change the symbology quickly in here, you know, the size of the points, and we can change them to different symbols. We have that available to us. We can look at the legend. We can look at the table behind the data. We can select individual items from here and highlight them, much like you can do in desktop GIS. We can filter items. For example, in this data set, if we only wanted to show National Weather Service stations and not NRCS stations, we could filter them out and just show a subset. We have the ability to cluster points if we want. You probably see this quite often on you know, really dense data sets at certain scales. If you don't want to show every point and it's going to be slow, you can do clustering. And you can perform analysis here on this analysis pane, where if you want to, like we talked about, clipping data or aggregating data, that type of thing. And we have a host of other options. We can set a transparency on the layer, right? We can make it, a lot of things you can do with desktop GIS, you can do in a web mapping interface. We can set the visibility, so when we're really zoomed out, we don't see the points, that kind of thing. You have a lot of choices. You can configure pop-ups, right? So if we want someone who uses the map to have a different flavor for what the default is, like if we don't want to show this FID, we can hide that, which is probably a pretty good idea in here. We can come in and say, FID is probably not very useful. And we could change, you know, to a more friendly name in here rather than saying some acronym there. You probably want to take some time to set these up. And when you come back in and select them, you know, it's a more friendly name, and we've hidden FID in that sort of thing. So you have a lot of control over how you want the layer to display and how you want the user to be able to interact with it. We can change the base map in here if we don't like that base map. We can choose a different type of base map for what you want to share with folks. That's certainly available. We can add data from different locations. Now we could browse the Living Atlas, for example, right? Or we could search for layers from just the University of Idaho or all across ArcGIS Online, or just within our content, we could add other layers. So say we wanted like the public lands. I did this one before, the public land survey system, for example. Let me go ahead and enter that. And from the federal user community, so this is a vetted data set from the Living Atlas that we can add here. And let's take a look at this one. And you'll see those flow in here. They're controlling the labeling on them. So you can see this is Township 42N, Range 1 East, and then you can get down to the sections and that type of thing, right? So we can add data from a variety of places. As with other data sets, you know, the hierarchy matters, so you can add one on top of the other, move them around, up and down, that type of thing. Turn them on and off, change the visibility. And you can label points as well if you want to have labels show up. Like if we zoomed in on an area and it wanted to show the station name, we could have labels show up on our map, for example, there, and you can style them. So let's go ahead and turn those labels off. And so we'll say we got our map to a point where we wanted to share it. We need to save it. We want to save it in our content. So we want to save the web map, and we're going to call it weather stations map and weather stations. And I'm going to put it in my folder called a new folder. And we can go back and take a look at that in our content now. We have this nice web map, and we'll have 3 items in our content now, right? We've got our web map here. We've got our feature layer here, which is our interactive hosted GIS layer. And then we've got the CSV that created this feature layer. So we've got the original CSV. We've got the hosted feature layer that was created from it. We've got the map that contains the feature layer, right? So that would be creating content. Right now, it's only accessible to us. Let's go back and look at that. We can change the sharing on it. We can we have some other functionality that's available here. And at this point, you'd have to decide, is this just for you or is this for other people if you want to share it more broadly, right? We can get code that once we would share this publicly with everyone, we would share both the hosted layer and this item. We could get a short link to this map once we share it with people. We could embed this map in a website if that's of interest. Once you share it here publicly or with a larger group, you can get the code to embed it in a website, or we could create a web application that contains this map so that you could provide more context and more detail around the information you're trying to convey. So back in the content tab, there's a few different tabs you can share it from. But over here, if we wanted to share those 2 items, we would simply share them with everyone. And we could save it right here. If you had set up a group, you could save it with the group. But if I share them publicly, these 2 items become accessible to anyone without any authentication. For example, once I go here and I'll just paste this in the chat, everyone should be able to access, locate this item. Oops, I didn't get it here. I can just give you actually this link. I'll tell you what, I'll do this. I will paste this in the chat. And everyone should be able to access that hyperlink now since it's shared with everyone and interact with that web map that we built. So let me go ahead and pause the recording. And well, before I do that, let me see, is there a cost to Geocode? This is a good one. Thank you, Michael, for this question. There is a cost to Geocode. Esri's platform runs on what are known as credits, and different operations use different number of credits. And what I would say, that used to be an issue in years past where we had a very limited number and the platform was more in its infancy, I guess I'd say. If you're doing geocoding for research or teaching, for all intents and purposes, we have an unlimited number of credits. So if you have big geocode jobs, and we can look up, you know, what 100 records is like 0.01 credits or something. But Esri's told us for higher education institutions, for research and teaching, don't let credits stand in the way of taking advantage of the platform. It's a different, probably a slightly different take on the administrative side if we're going to do geocoding, so we'd want to look at that, but we can look that number up. If you look up by place, can you tweak the coordinates if you have a campus address? It's not an exact location. You could move it around. Yeah, you could geocode and then move the point around. You could also create your own locator, I guess, if we had more detailed addresses than the default locator that Esri makes available for geocoding. So there's probably a couple of different approaches, if I'm understanding the question correctly, that we could look at. So let me stop there. I'm going to pause one more time and finish up. You can certainly contact me at bgodfrey@uidaho.edu for any additional questions on the platform, and I'm happy to try to help you at any point.